Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It is a privilege to welcome you to the online public forum being hosted by the Mona School of Business and Management. Welcome to another in this series. Today, I'm particularly excited to be your moderator for this most germane topic. And today we're looking at cruise shipping and tours in the Caribbean. Prior to COVID-19, there were a number of issues and a number of contentions related to cruise ships. A lot of this surrounded the discussions about sustainability on all fronts of sustainability, issues about economic impact, real economic impact, issues to do with social impacts, and more prevalent than the others, issues to do with the environment and how cruise ships have engaged in discussions surrounding how to treat with environmental issues. But of course, in this COVID era, it has brought many things to bear. In fact, it has brought the cruise industry to almost a grinding halt. And for many Caribbean countries, this is an important part of their tourism arrivals. In fact, in some cases, it is 50%. In other cases, it's higher than stopover arrivals. So the Mona School of Business and Management thought that the timing was right to have this discussion, because as a part of our advocacy role, we understand that we have to get these ideas out. We have to be thought leaders, and we have to be the ones who encourage this kind of engagement. So the cruise experts in the Caribbean actually believe that the cruise industry cannot survive without the Caribbean, and that the current pause is really an excellent opportunity that is presented for a unified front and for us to negotiate a more beneficial relationship with the industry from a position of strength. Today, September 30th, would have marked what should have been the end of the no-sail order coming out of the CDC. My understanding is that that too is likely to be extended for a further period. Today, we have with us some excellent individuals who have come to share. We have experts in the industry. But before I tell you who they are, just like to say I'm Andrew Spencer. I'm the Deputy Executive Director for Undergraduate Affairs at the Mona School of Business and Management. And I'm also a senior lecturer in the area of tourism, focusing specifically on issues to do with tourism development. We also have with us today Dr. Michelle McLeod, who is a tourism expert, and she's a lecturer also in the area of tourism and a member of the UWI COVID-19 task force. And she'll be speaking to us on cruise shipping and tours in the Caribbean region. We also have with us Dr. Lee Bailey, who is CEO of Caribbean Cruise Shipping and Tours Limited. And he'll be speaking about the post-pandemic opportunities and strategic protocols. We're having a very interesting mix today because Dr. McLeod is Trinidadian and Dr. Bailey is Jamaican. And we also have with us Miss Julianne Burrows, who I think comes to us from Barbados. She's a cruise advisor with Caribbean Village, and she'll be speaking on cruise shipping and tours in the Caribbean, a unified approach. Ladies and gentlemen, it is really a critical time for this discussion. We've seen some cruise lines engaging in a process of selling some of their vessels. That's the point at which we are. And so we have an opportunity for pivoting. We have an opportunity to look at how we can leverage as a region for a better impact for our people. Before I get into the agenda, I wanted to remind you of a few forum rules which we'll ask you to abide by so that we can have a very seamless discussion today. We ask that you mute all your microphones and that you place your questions and comments in the chat. We will do our best to engage you. And of course, please use the raise hand feature during the question and answer segment. I want to introduce a gentleman now who was one of the architects of this series of public fora. He is executive in residence at the Mona School of Business and Management, Mr. James Solomon. Let's make him welcome. Jimmy, over to you.
Thank you very much, Andrew. And let me say hello to everyone who has joined us. Special thanks I must extend to those who will be presenting, and I anticipate many will ask questions. Briefly, there are 4 reasons that I have in my job at the Mona School of Business and Management as one of the executives in residence. Those are, firstly, the role of a university is to make ideas contend without censorship or censure. That has been so for the centuries that universities have been around. Secondly, our job is to develop minds through dialogue, leading to implementation. It's no use us here just talking about the theory of things, and this is what the Mona School of Business has set out to do, to make ideas become reality. Thirdly, we want to address topics in the society that require new and novel solutions. I particularly use the word novel because it is also used in a description of the novel COVID virus. And it is a new symptom that has come along at a time when cruise shipping is at its height. And therefore, we have to have new solutions that will allow us to benefit. And fourthly, to enable the fulfillment of good citizenship. That is what a university should do. This is what we set out to do, and to make our contribution to the wider society for the benefit of all. I want to thank you for being here, for the participation that we'll have later on, and to thank you all for trying to help us make our University of the West Indies, and in particular, the Mona School of Business and Management, a successful university for the modern time. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Masalomon, for framing in context why we do what we do. And it's a very important role of a university in this time, certainly. And one key individual who has been at the heart of some of these discussions surrounding COVID-19 is here with us today. Dr. Michelle McLeod, who is a tourism expert, is also on the UWI COVID-19 task force. Michelle has over 28 years tourism industry experience, and she's a practitioner and an academic. Her latest co-edited book is entitled Tourism Management in Warm Water Island Destinations. What better person to take us through a discussion surrounding cruising in our warm waters in the Caribbean than Dr. Michelle McLeod. Let's make her welcome. Over to you, Michelle. I think we may be having a slight challenge with the technology on Dr. McLeod's side. Are you with us now, Dr. McLeod?
Yes, good evening, everyone. And thank you so much, Dr. Spencer. I'm just going to start sharing my screen so that the presentation comes up. Is it all okay?
Perfect.
Okay, welcome to the Mona School of Business and Management Public Forum. I want to thank MSBM for organizing this very important event to such a major industry in our region. I just want to as well say that the COVID-19 task force of the University of the West Indies, our role across the region has been one to inform what the Caribbean's response should be in the face of this pandemic. When we look at the cruise industry worldwide, it is a major contributor to several economies across the globe. And in 2019, the Florida Caribbean Cruise Association and Cruise Lines International Association, the two major associations, accounted for something like 30 million guests, an increase of 6.4% over 2018. And in 2017, the cruise industry's employment was 1,108,676 jobs. And that is significant, as we saw what happened in March when the pandemic reached our shores. And a total output worldwide of US $134 billion. So it is a very important industry. It is important not only for our region, but across the globe. In terms of what is happening in the industry, the various market segments, we see that the cruising industry really grew and was popularized in the 1970s, 80s, as it was romanticized as the type of experience that you would want for getting away from the normal, mundane. And this industry, the various segments, really grown. You have now what is Instagrammable cruise travel, where everyone on a platform is talking about their cruise experiences and sharing information and promoting various cruise products and services. Total restoration, achievement over experience, smart tech, conscious travel, new luxury, the Generation Z, those born 2000 and after, off-peak adventures, working nomads, female-centered cruising, the girls going together, or you can go alone. So it is really a diverse industry covering a number of market segments, a number of customers, and this is what we are seeing in terms of the growth of the cruise industry worldwide. But when you look at this global industry, you see that the Caribbean accounts for something like 35% of the share of this global industry. I am not aware of any other industry where the Caribbean would have such a significant share of the market. Followed by the Mediterranean, 17%, and then you have all other regions having a chunk of 16%. So really, the Caribbean, 35% is double what another major region, the Mediterranean, has. So what is our performance in terms of the cruise industry in this region? In 2019, we received an estimated 28,941,888 cruise visitors, according to the Caribbean Tourism Organization, an increase of 3.5%. In addition to that, when you look at the destinations that were performing very well, you saw the British Virgin Islands having a growth of something like 186.8% compared to 2018, and Dominica 70.9% compared to 2018. And if you recall, and my next point is that these two countries were impacted by a devastating hurricane in 2017. And they were able to rebound with cruise tourism. And it shows the potential of having this particular activity at our shores being able to sustain some of the economic activities that you would derive from tourism. When we talk about economic impact of tourism, we're talking about foreign exchange, we're talking about employment. And some of the other countries that experienced double-digit growth in 2019, the Dominican Republic, 12.4%, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, 11.9%, the Bahamas, 11.3%, and Bermuda, 10.6%. So this is a chart moving on from 2019, what is happening in 2020. And this is the latest information from the Caribbean Tourism Organization, who monitors performance of cruise and stayover arrivals across the region. What we see, most of the destinations indicated January to July information. We just have two countries and one from January to February and January to March. So it is current information. In terms of those countries that experience or destination, because the Cozumel is a destination, the top 5 countries that experience the most percentage change: Bermuda, minus 98%, Cozumel, minus 63.5%, St. Martin, minus 60.4%, the Bahamas, minus 59.2%, and St. Kitts Nevis, minus 59.2%. So these countries reporting that the fall off in terms of cruise visitor arrivals has been great. Those that reported not such a large percentage change: Martinique, Dominica, Grenada, Curacao, and St. Vincent and the Grenadines. So these islands and countries, they have been able to sort of manage in terms of the decline in cruise visitor arrivals. Some of the external shocks, Dr. Spencer mentioned the no sail order, and most of our fly cruise and cruise home porting activities are done in the US. So of course, a no sail order by the USA certainly affects persons who want to engage with cruise in the region. And then the fear of the cruise ship itself being a means of where you would have cases of the COVID-19 virus. And so persons are very wary of this, and health and safety concerns remain. While some cruise lines are selling, some cruise lines are actually scrapping mega ships, and this is a really sad part, but it is a reality in terms of the decrease in the number of persons who are not traveling in terms of cruise tourism. Of course, these ships are empty. What do you do with them? The employees, we saw a number of ships having staff members remain on these vessels for weeks, and some persons contracting, and the selling of ships. So all these series of events or reactions in terms of a pandemic coming on stream has resulted in really the industry being faced with a decline. This is just an example of 2 ships that have been sold. And you will note that the buyer is the China State Shipbuilding Corporation. And with what has been happening in industry, there are some new opportunities. And I think while the cruise industry has been very good in terms of dealing with outbreaks of health matters previously, in terms of handling the pandemic that we now face, they really need to look at some specific issues to ensure and reassure persons that they will be healthy and safe in terms of taking a cruise. And there's some examples of health programs that the major cruise lines, Carnival and Royal Caribbean, they have engaged with to deal with some of the health and safety issues. And as well, there are opportunities where the cruise lines are looking internally in terms of the environmental impact they would have in our region. The Caribbean being, we have a marine environment that is vulnerable, and having cruise vessels, so a number of cruise lines are looking at energy and waste management and how to be more efficient in terms of handling their operations. And why not? If you have empty cruise ships, these cruise ships can become tourist attractions. We saw a number of them huddled across the region, and why not have a cruise tour? Home porting possibilities, this has been talked about in several countries across the region, but I am yet to see where Caribbean governments have come together and developed a home porting policy for the region that would mean the spin-off of various industry, manufacturing, agriculture could benefit from such a possibility. And what about cruise lines as transportation? While they are being utilized as pleasure vessels, what about cruise lines transporting persons across the islands of the Caribbean? So just coming to the end of my presentation, policymakers need to evaluate government's contribution to the cruise industry, including port facilities, facilitation services. It's a number of islands have made significant investments in developing. And so the cruise lines are partners in this development. So there is need to find a way of evaluating and measuring what is government's contribution to this industry as well. Roundtable discussions with industry, there's the task force, Prime Minister Mia Mottley is part of that for the Americas on the cruise tourism. And we certainly need to have policies coming out of these types of activities that will guide the sustainability of the cruise industry in the Caribbean. Policies relating financing for goods and services targeted for the cruise industry. This is necessary, particularly for the smaller operators. I think no other industry in this region. You have persons who are sole proprietors, tour guides, taxi drivers, craft vendors. These are what you would say persons who are small, but this is their industry. And so we need to find ways ensuring that they are getting the benefits from cruise tourism. General policies relating to duty-free shopping, labor relations, environmental integrity, infrastructure, and importantly, as the University of the West Indies, education and training for the cruise industry. And one of the things that we need to also consider is the whole role of destination managers and the destination organization sector, whether it be government or the various hotel and tourism association, the cruise associations. Those persons who are involved need to interact and form some kind of council, so to speak, as to guide some of the decision making that needs to happen about cruising in the Caribbean. So while the FCCA, they have been very good in conducting studies about the benefits of cruising, we need to find ways of looking at how some of those benefits are trickling down across the economy to have a stronger argument of when a country makes an investment in a port or an investment to facilitate cruise tourism, we are seeing all the benefits that this one investment would realize. So there are figures there in terms of 2017, 2018 in Jamaica, what the contribution, cruise tourism expenditure, US 244.53 million, generating employment of 8,293 persons, and the wage income, US 56.57 million. One of the things we also need to look at, because there's a lot of data about what is happening in cruise destinations. Look at how we as...
Dr. McLeod? Doc?
Yes.
Yes, your time is up. So if you could give us your concluding remarks.
Yes. One of the things, this is my last point actually. Thank you, Dr. Spencer. One of the things we have to consider is that the various activities in the destination, what are we offering to ensure that you have 30 Caribbean tourism destinations, all having various products. The authenticity of these products that are being offered to our cruise visitors, our visitors experiencing what is very unique of our culture and heritage in the Caribbean. And so these are some of the considerations I think would help us when we look at the sustainability of the cruise industry in the Caribbean. And thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. McLeod. I think certainly what you have teased out for us are some of the issues that would have been obvious to some of us, but there are elements there with some of the new opportunities that you've brought to the table that would be quite exciting and novel to a few of us. What I quite liked was this discussion about the romanticization of cruising and how that all unfolded. And I think some of that romanticization never ever died. And while many of the issues surrounding cruising are endogenous, many of these shocks are actually exogenous shocks. And I think for a long time, policymakers have become a bit anesthetized to some of these realities that are possible. But I think some of that anesthesia has worn off now. COVID has done that. Gives us an opportunity to pivot and to have these discussions. So there's a gentleman, thank you again, Dr. McLeod. Before I move to the next presenter, I want to encourage you to stick around for our panel discussion. And I'm encouraging you to put your questions in the chat, please. We're looking forward to engaging you. Put your questions in the chat and let us have a discussion, both on Zoom and on YouTube. So For a long time, the discussion surrounding cruise lines and the negotiations that have to do with cruise lines have sometimes taken on the personal agendas of individuals in the Caribbean. In fact, those negotiating tend to limit those negotiations to issues surrounding, cruise calls and trying to get themselves on an itinerary 18 months or 24 months ahead. But there has been a lack of depth in those negotiations and discussions. And to take us a little bit deeper into some of what he considers to be the things we should be talking about is Dr. Lee Bailey. Dr. Bailey is the former chairman of St. James High School and a former president of the Montego Bay Chamber of Commerce and Industry. He was a general manager of Martins Jamaica, one of the largest tour operators and travel agents at the time. Dr. Bailey was educated at Titchfield High, St. George's College, and the University of the West Indies, and is a former assistant governor of Rotary International and also a Paul Harris Fellow. He has lectured in Cuba and made contributions to Penn State University in management, as well as the Mona School of Business and Management. He's the owner and president of Caribbean Cruise Shipping and Tours Limited and the Caribbean Cruise Shipping Services. He's also a director of the Jamaica Cruise Council. Dr. Bailey is committed to the development of Jamaica, its people, and the business community, and is a tourism ambassador. He studied in the UK and holds a doctorate in tourism management and hospitality. And he's a fellow of the International Management Center Association. Let's make Dr. Lee Bailey welcome. Dr. Bailey, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I presume that you can hear me very well.
Yes.
Okay, it's a matter of getting the slides up on here quickly. I'm having some difficulty getting slides up. I don't know if you can assist me from your end there. Can you hear me? There you go. I want to say I'm very pleased to be part of this discussion this evening, as it means a lot to me, very dear to my heart. So my topic this afternoon is going to deal with Caribbean cruise shipping and tours in the Caribbean, but more particularly with the pandemic and the opportunities and some strategic protocols. Earlier this year, in March, about the middle of March, the entire world was attacked by coronavirus, otherwise labeled COVID-19. All businesses that I'm aware of were affected, and most significantly was the travel trade, which including cruise ship industry. All of the activities surrounding the cruise industry came to a grinding halt and is still at that stage. What I want to do is to remind the listeners that no one in living memory have had the experience of this kind of worldwide fallout before. Not as far as all researchers and all the data I've looked at. So the background is according to the Jamaica Tourist World statistic in January 13, 2020, there were approximately 4.3 million visitors to the island, to the Caribbean area, and of which 1.5 million were passengers to Jamaica. The Florida Cruise Shipping Caribbean Cruise Association indicated that the Caribbean region was the most popular area for cruising, which was indicated by my colleague earlier on. But this included the Eastern, Western, and Southern Caribbean region. The Caribbean accounted for approximately 10.1 million passengers and crew from data coming out of FCCA, which is in keeping with my colleagues' information earlier on. My focus of this presentation will be based on the Western Caribbean, and in particular, Jamaica. I have listed here an itinerary which shows the origin of a cruise to the Western Caribbean, which originates out of Galveston, comes to Montego Bay, Cozumel, and Grand Cayman. The other one originates out of Fort Lauderdale, goes to Falmouth, Grand Cayman, Cozumel, and then Key West. I want to point out something significant here for our listeners. There's a law in the United States which comes under Jones Act, which prevents any cruise vessel from sailing out of one port in the United States and ending up back in another port in the United States. It is compelled to go to a foreign port before return to the United States. I thought I'd make that point. Then we have another Western itinerary, which was the most popular in the early years, that leaves Miami and circumvent Cuba, goes to Otrius, Cayman, and Cozumel. These information will be significant when I get to the end of my presentation. The tourism interest and government concern, as well as key tourism stakeholders like myself, position, have created the focus for this discussion, along with the prevailing COVID-19 pandemic. It's against this background that the following areas were examined, both for immediate action and post-pandemic execution. I want to step out of the box for a little while and look at an opportunity which has existed for pretty close to 60 or 70 years that Jamaica could take advantage of. And that is the 64 acres of Navy Island and the vast landmass in Folly, Portland. This could be used to add to a sustainable economic development and perhaps for even naval investment. And even perhaps for training, cottage industry, etc., which we'll discuss later on. The current Minister of Tourism must be given some credit because he highlighted earlier last year that we need to maximize our efforts in widening the spread of the earnings from the cruise industry, especially through innovative creativity and new activities. Currently, Jamaica has increased its port facilities. Prior to the COVID-19 epidemic, Port Royal was added to part of our offering. It increased our port facilities at cruise line port facilities from 4 to 5, while at the same time increasing our capacity. The current ports that we have as cruise ports in Jamaica now are Port Antonio, Falmouth, Montego Bay, Ochiris, and Port Royal. Just for your information, there's no other Caribbean island, English-speaking Caribbean island, that has this amount of cruise ports, which gives us a distinct advantage. I've listed pictures of the cruise ports here for you and to explain their current capacity and perhaps their use. Port Antonio is a small port and facilities which can only take boutique ships, large luxury yachts, and has a limited current capacity, but it can also handle what we call turnaround ships, home porting, apart from one disadvantage, its distance from the airport. Falmouth currently is the largest cruise facility we have, which can carry all sizes of ship today and the future cruise lines. Falmouth has a massive carrying capacity and can also handle turnaround and home porting, as well as regular cruise calls. Montego Bay, on the other hand, have been handling most of the turnarounds and can also handle regular cruise calls, primarily because of its proximity to the airport. It has been handling most of the home porting activities. Ochiris, on the other hand, can also handle all the large vessels, but has one slight disadvantage as far as home porting and turnaround is concerned. It's a finger pier, as you can see in the picture here. It stretches out like a finger, and therefore large trucks and trailers cannot go to the ship to transport goods and services. Port Royal, which I welcome to the additional activities and services that we can offer, is perhaps one of the most notable destinations in the history of the Caribbean. It now has a finger pier and is not capable of handling home porting or turnaround activities, but is capable of carrying at least one large ship, as was demonstrated in repatriations of crew recently, and it is an additional to our cruise facilities. Now, I want to point out that we have to look at our innovations and new ideas, because finding from research conducted by me and some other fellows is that we could maximize the use of our port facilities if with the current cruise calls to Jamaica could be doubled or tripled. I want to explain that, meaning that you call at several ports before you leave Jamaica. If that could be introduced to the cruise lines, that would cause other benefits to go to other communities in a single call from a single cruise ship. I had the opportunity to spend some time in Cuba to advise them and lecture them on cruise calls. I gave them this information and they really went overboard. They went and negotiated for all the calls to be done in Cuba, all the calls. And so they had 5 calls at 5 different places in Cuba, and all the calls that was their entire itinerary on that ship. Home porting is something that we need to examine very carefully. When you have home porting, if you look at the goods and services that are transported from elsewhere to go on board the vessels, you'll be shocked to realize that there are some bananas which is less than our standards, some papaya which doesn't look like papaya, and if those things, in my view, were substandard, and I think our destination could provide those things right at the port where they're home porting. But I'll explain that later on. Now, I want to explain what a flight exchange is, slightly different from home porting. A flight exchange is where a cruise ship will come to a port, and it will only have a certain amount of people that they did not make the ship at one destination, and it's changing around those passengers, just the passengers alone and their luggage, but not supplying goods and services. What could happen for double porting, which had happened in the past? This is nothing new. Many years ago, when a cruise ship would call in Kingston, they would sell them tours that would go on the south coast or the north coast, and they would overnight in hotels and then join the ship at the other port. So that's a great possibility to look at during this period. It's important that we understand that the cruise line people are very hard negotiators. And it's important that we develop the kind of partnership with the cruise line in the area of training, perhaps farming, and perhaps training of employees that they want on board their ships. It's interesting to note the chaos which developed during the pandemic in the repatriation of our Jamaican workers on board the vessels. We need to examine that, just in case, we hope it never happens again, that there's something else that will happen where we'll have so much difficulty repatriating our own Jamaicans back home. What I want to look at now is what I call matching operational protocol. It's important to understand that the cruise lines are going to have their own port protocols and very strict guidelines as well. And therefore, we need to look at those guidelines, go and visit them, and work cohesively with them to see that our protocols and theirs match in order to handle what I call mass tourism protocol arrangements. Now, the role of the Ministry of Health and Wellness is very important. a greater role will have to be played by the various health department in streamlining the standards and protocols in regard to cruise shipping and its crew. Clearer regulation as to who really is in charge of the general pandemic protocols, whether it should be the Ministry of Health who directly deals with the cruise lines or Tourism Development Company. It is my view, and certainly the view of one of my colleagues, that the Ministry of Health and Wellness are the experts, and they should be ones setting the standards required, and those standards as it relates to any tourism investment. I seem to have lost the slides a bit, but I can finish without the slides. It was, in conclusion, we hope that this discussion undertaken here would generate a greater interest and would stimulate activities that I feel would cause and encourage the development of various and other areas such as cultural, historical, and a partnership with other new communities. Iberly, a researcher in May 2007, stated that unless tourism was managed properly, it could be an engine of destruction rather than a force of economic development. And finally, in closing, the United Nations Committee on Sustainable Development in 2009 adopted a position central to these issues, which is indicated that host countries could maximize their earnings from tourism that will create a wider spread at the local level and build better social capital. I want to thank you for listening, and sorry about the disappearance of the slide. I am through. Can you hear me? Hello?
Yes, thank you very much, Dr. Bailey.
Sorry about that.
Not a problem. Very informative presentation. I don't think we'll be too hard on you for losing the slide at the conclusion. But I think you certainly brought up some matters here that we will delve into a little bit more deeply in the panel discussion. Yes. Certainly the fact that you raised the issue of strategic protocols is something that's quite dear to me. And in a previous role, just recently as executive director of TPD, I think there's a particular role for that entity to diversify the areas around our ports, to facilitate a lot of what you've talked about in terms of multiple ports of call in one destination space. I will get back to that in a little while, but I want to encourage everyone to keep posting their questions in the chat, both on Zoom and also on YouTube. We'll get around to those in short order. But I'm very excited right now because I have here with me today Julie Ann Burrows, who is going to be talking about something that I am excited about. It's something I've grappled with, it's something I've agonized over, this notion of whether we can find a way to engage in a unified approach. Indeed, we're at a stage right now of do or die. And so we have to understand that if cruising is a multi-destination activity, there's no way that we can continue to be nationalistic with a multi-destination activity. And I think Julie is going to talk a little bit about that and get us thinking deeply on these issues. Over to you, Julian. Unmute your mic, Julian.
Thank you very much. Are you able to see my screen? Yes?
Yes, we can.
Okay, perfect. So this is I think, again, this is a topic that's of fundamental interest and importance to us in the region as we move forward. Dr. McLeod provided us with a framework under which which provided the importance of the region in the industry within the region, and Dr. Bailey gave us the importance of how what are the possibilities within the national context of Jamaica. I'm going to focus more on how do we approach cruise tourism, not just from a national level, but as a regional approach, a regional body. So small island states of the Caribbean are still heavily reliant on tourism. And there's no denying that cruise tourism continues and will continue to play an important role in the overall tourism product. The coronavirus pandemic, the coronavirus pandemic has had a pronounced and immediate impact on the entire cruise tourism ecosystem. In the last 2 decades alone, the cruise industry has shown its resilience against a series of terrorist, biological, environmental, and economic shocks. Some of which have provoked short or long-term change. The 9/11, so we had, for example, the industry went through 9/11 terrorist attacks, which saw a halt in air traffic temporarily and fundamentally changed travel security policies, and also caused a great shift in cruising in the industry, where in response to travelers' fear of flying at the time, cruise lines implemented drive-through cruising. That is where passengers were able to drive in fairly close proximity to a US port, pick up a cruise, and be able to sail away. This type of survival mechanism was not positioned the industry not just to survive, but also to thrive, because it opened up the sector to new source markets. The industry survived the 2003 SARS outbreak, the economic recession, and energy crisis in 2008 and 2009, which slowed international travel. But the COVID pandemic presents a greater set of challenges. Slide 3. The COVID pandemic presents a greater set of challenges for the sector, as the very nature of the virus can impact the touch points in a cruise, pretty much all the touch points in a cruise. So really and truly, the pandemic has not been about an onboard issue. It's on board, it's on shore, it's on flight, it's pretty much at any interaction point in the passenger's journey. Cruise lines have been, from the start of this pandemic, very visibly and inextricably linked to the outbreak. You know, we saw images of the Diamond Princess at the beginning in February, where it was quarantined in Yokohama amid a COVID-19 outbreak that sickened, I think, just about 19% of the just over 3,700 passengers that were on board. So we've seen ships across the world, and it's been all over the news, passengers trapped at sea, ships not being allowed to dock, crew members on hunger strikes. So the industry, unlike other challenges in the past, have been almost front and center of this particular pandemic. So what we understand is that right now we are really living in an upside down world. And that sometimes if you're living in an upside down world, you have to let life turn you right side up so you can learn to live in that direction. So what have we learned? What are the lessons from the pandemic? Probably the biggest lesson is that we're all connected within our own units, communities, islands, globally, and within the entire cruise sector. I mean, the pandemic has affected us all at varying degrees, but it has affected us all. We've also learned, and what we've also seen is that it's reinforced the vulnerability of the cruise sector and the need perhaps for some diversification in the way how we approach our sector. It's also revealed that there is, and this is not just for cruise tourism, but just for tourism overall, that there is a possible over-reliance on tourism. And it demonstrates in stark fashion that what happens when the industry, that supports an entire community grinds to a complete halt and almost collapses. So the pandemic has really served as an indispensable lesson to the region on the transparency of destinations. So what's our vision for the future? And I think that's where it all starts. You have to have a vision. There's a saying that without a vision, the people perish. And I think that's what we've been lacking within the sector, to not just have a vision at the national level, but to have a vision at the regional level of how we will move our sector forward. And I want to propose here today, this is my vision, and has always been my vision for the sector, that we are seeking to really advance a thriving and sustainable regional cruise tourism sector that delivers authentic and enriching destination experiences and that maximizes the benefits to local communities. And for me, the only way that this can truly be done is through effective partnership arrangements. And I'll go into that a little bit more as I go on. So how do we chart a new course? How do we move forward? There are three constants, and I was speaking to a friend of mine, Grant from Inchcape, and he said to me, Julianne, there are three constants in life: change, choices, and principles. You can either change or be changed. Within those changes, you have choices to make, and those choices are built on your principles and values. And I think that's where we are at right now in the sector. That the halt in cruising has set the stage for a long overdue discussion on the social, environmental, and economic implications of cruise tourism. We are for me, we're at a really good juncture to ask the question: should we be looking at a resumption of business as usual at any cost, or is now the perfect opportunity to create a more sustainable model of regional cruise tourism? I think the pandemic has given us an opportunity to make fundamental changes in terms of how we vision, approach, and manage the cruise tourism sector within the region. And that the absence of cruise tourism and tourism in general has forced us really to consider ways in which we can diversify, and in some instances that where we must diversify. So it really has certainly highlighted vulnerabilities in the cruise value chain. For example, the challenges facing tour operators and ship agents, and it's something that we don't often spend a lot of time on, but they're a critical part of the value chain, and this has severely impacted them, because you cannot have any resumption of cruising without a healthy tour operator and ship agent operating within the region. So we really have to think, how do we really pivot? And it goes back to the real title of this: how do we pivot and be able to maintain the industry within the region's ecological, sociocultural, and carrying capacity? especially with the increasing size of cruise ships. One of the danger of what we've seen in other parts of the world has been over tourism, and that is the saturation of a destination by visitors in such numbers that it cannot sustain, that it is not sustainable. So what the pandemic has shown us, especially if you look at places such as Venice, where before the streets were heaving with passengers, where there's such a thing as Venexodus, where Venetians were moving out of the city because there were just too many visitors to the city, that you now see the canals are free and clear again, the fish have returned. So, we really have to stop and think, where do we want to go from here? And again, I think this brings us to the whole context of partnership. How do we pivot within a partnership type framework? And we've seen partnerships exist, and we've experienced it at the level of the Caribbean Village. And the Caribbean Village really is a marketing initiative that was established to provide a greater visibility, I should say, to the Caribbean destinations, to the Mediterranean and European markets. So over 60 representatives from more than 14 countries will go every year jointly to destinations in Europe to promote cruising within the Caribbean. I guess the vision is we promote Caribbean cruising first, because if ships are not coming to this region, then they're not coming to any destination. And we've looked to see how can we build out, how can we use this type of platform, which has been so effective, to advance or to create deeper linkages, deeper regional linkages in advancement of the cruise sector. So worldwide, these types of partnership arrangements have become key drivers in response to growing competition and global opportunities, and have also been used to differentiate cruising regions. So we've seen partnership arrangements in the Med. There's a Med cruise, there's a Cruise Baltic, there is a Cruise Atlantic, Cruise Canada, you name it. Asian ports have come together, Cruise the Asian Sea, and it goes on. But the Caribbean, which is, as Dr. McLeod pointed out, the #1 cruising region worldwide, which experiences, which I should say enjoys more than 1/3 of the global market share, does not have such an entity that is really there just driving business, not setting necessarily policy, helping to inform it, but driving business to the region. And I think if we had such a partnership structure, and if it had been in existence prior to COVID, I am putting forward out there that we might have been in a better position to respond to issues such as the acceptance or docking of cruise ships during the pandemic, the provision of safe havens for vessels anchored at sea, and as Lee mentioned, the repatriation of regional crew, and which was very challenging for a number of ports. So these issues, while they would still have been slightly problematic or challenging, may have been less so if we would have been able to have dealt with them within a partnership framework. So where do we go from here? I think this is a start for the Caribbean to create a partnership. And Humphrey Bogart said it best at the end of Casablanca. I think this is the beginning of a beautiful partnership. So even as we look to restart the sector, there needs to be a unified and cohesive approach, that this is objective to address issues critical to the successful reopening can only be done through this type of collaboration. And we have to, and that type of framework would allow us to effectively address things like developing and implementing a common set of policies and protocols that we can have as a base level for destinations within the region. It will allow us to better craft communications and marketing campaigns and be able to help restore consumer confidence and perhaps stimulate demand, because we're now in essentially what is a demand-driven environment. And this is one of the biggest challenges I think that it will be for the region as it moves forward, that we are able to really conduct internal research to ascertain the health of destinations and identify any gaps and challenges. And I think as as Dr. Spencer, I think you mentioned, cruising is a multi-destination product. It's not just one product on an itinerary. So we're only as good as the other destinations on it. And that we are able to build some type of institutional cooperation mechanisms. And I know we have the various task force that Dr. McLeod is on, and other type arrangements, but that we really have to have that basic institutional cooperating mechanisms between regional organizations where we are creating regional networks and knowledge sharing. So in conclusion, I think our very existence and where we go from here is dependent on how we decide to go. So there's an African proverb that says, if you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to go far, go together. And I believe that that's where we are within the Caribbean sector. Again, if we look at other destinations around the globe, and we've been speaking to a lot of them, these are the types of structures that are already in place. This is where the Caribbean needs to get up to speed on, and I believe this is what is going to allow us to truly craft a cruise tourism sector that's environmentally, socially, and economically sustainable. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much, Julianne. Thank you. I'm sure that everyone can tell from your presentation that your wealth of experience has come to bear on the discussion. In fact, Julie is quite accomplished, having worked for the Florida Caribbean Cruise Association. She's worked for the Barbados Tourism Authority and held senior positions in both. And at present, she is, in her capacity as independent advisor, she advocates passionately, as you saw her do just now, for a unified regional approach to crafting a more sustainable cruise sector. Julie, coming out of your presentation, some of my takeaways very quickly, this issue of a more sustainable regional approach. And I think that's where I kind of want to start the panel discussion when we get there, encouraging everyone as well, keep posting those questions. We want to have you involved. And certainly as the region with more than a third of global cruising, as everyone has indicated, I think there are some things that we have to critically analyze at this particular juncture. The question I wanted to ask, first of all the panelists, and I think from a sustainability perspective, we could go very deeply on some of the things that Dr. McLeod mentioned. In fact, I'm going to, at this moment, use the chairman's prerogative and dispel with all the, dispose of all the titles. So it's going to be Lee, Michelle, Andrew, and Julie at this point, having a seamless discussion. So one of the things that Michelle said earlier actually was the whole issue of waste management facilities and those kinds of considerations from an environmental standpoint. And of course, we're very familiar with some of the social issues. Everybody recognizes that even though the impact has not been as deep as it could be, one of the things we are able to quickly establish is that, for example, my craft market vendors, I say my because of a recent job, are now complaining that there are no cruise ships coming to the island. I mean, so there are these issues that we face. But the question I want to ask the panel is an economic one. The point has been made for a very long time that cruise ships provide an opportunity for critical mass. We've been trying to get the per head spending up. That has been a challenge. The other thing we keep hearing is that cruise ships give people an opportunity to see a destination and then return and stop over. The actual data suggests that that happens very few times. So really what I want to ask the panel is, how do we at this critical point when we're trying to pivot and when we have this opportunity for leverage, engage in serious discussions about how we deepen the economic impact of cruising on our region? Any thoughts?
Well, I would say that, sorry. I would say
go
that,
ahead, Julie.
I would say that, again, we've always traditionally been, when we look at our cruise tourism sectors, we've approached it from, we have determined success by the number of passengers coming to our shore versus the value of the passengers, the value that those passengers bring. And we have always said, you know, we have 1 million passengers, but when you look at the figures, is the spend there, is the value, is, you know, are they bringing the economic benefit that they can? And I think that, again, based on where we are currently, we have the opportunity, yes, to sit and negotiate with cruise lines, but it first starts with us. You know, cruising kind of happened to the Caribbean. You know, we were in close proximity to the North American market. It started and here we were and we kind of accepted it. So that's why I said we are at a good juncture now where we can determine where we want to go from here. And one of those things I think that we really truly need to look at is not the numbers. Numbers, yes, in terms of what's the overall carrying capacity of each destination, things that we've never even considered, that we consider at one level, but we've never really internalized, let's put it that way. So I think there is a real opportunity. I think that the very nature in terms of how cruising may restart in an interesting way might actually drive that, because you may be seeing cruising almost going back to its heyday when it started, where it was seen as a truly luxury type vacation and something that you had to save for, and you know, aspirational entity. So you might be able to, we might start seeing a better, maybe a higher value type passenger, where the yields from the sector are greater. So I think, again, it's starting off with our vision, but also understanding that there's that opportunity right now to extract more from the industry, and also not just extract more, but be able to look internally at our products, because that's the other way you generate more revenue. Do we have the right types of products out there in terms of our shore excursions, in terms of our shopping, in terms of our craft that can command a higher type value?
Thank you, Julie. So I hear the emphasis on the supply side, and I quite agree that there's some work to be done there throughout the entire region. Michelle, your thoughts on the question?
Well, I think one of the issues really has to do with measuring the contribution of the sector. If we're looking at deepening that contribution or expanding it, we need to understand the various areas of expenditure. We also need to understand, it's almost like checking and having a cruise tourism satellite account. What are some of the direct expenditure, the indirect, and measuring that, the trickle down, as we call it, in the economy. That measurement, along with taking ownership, and I think this is, whose industry is the cruise industry? Is it a North American industry, a Florida Caribbean industry, or is it our industry that we are driving? that we are setting policies for, that we are growing, that everyone is managing, we are promoting, and we have some say. And this is why I'm saying it's almost like we need to form some kind of council so that we have greater control. I didn't want to use the word in terms of the benefits that the Caribbean will be getting from this sector.
Dr. McLeod, and I want to hop in here because I think I very much agree with what you say, but I also want to say this. Why should we be cautious in using the word control? It's our sector. And you're absolutely right. It is our sector. We are the managers of it. We should know exactly. It's like any relationship. You have to know exactly what you want, what you bring to the table, and what you wish to get out of that relationship. What value do you have? What are your key strengths? And it's not necessarily that you're coming from a position of confrontation, but it is a matter of control, that you are in control with your own, of your own destiny, of your own sector, and that you have determined this is what we believe would be of greater benefit to our destinations, and would more enrich the lives of our local communities.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, Lee, in a second. Thank you, Michelle, and thank you, Julie. I think this is a perfect platform for Lee to come in on. I think what I hear coming out here, just to capture, know your worth when you enter space of negotiation.
Yeah, I have been involved in this business personally for a long time. In fact, I was instrumental in putting FCCA together, in case you don't know. The cruise line is a business, and their business have an itinerary that goes to various Caribbean islands. And those Caribbean islands is a major part of their itinerary. Without the Caribbean islands, they wouldn't have an itinerary. Let's establish that before we go on. What each individual Caribbean island wants to benefit from those people coming to the country must be looked at carefully. The cruise line operation comes to the port with 5,000 people. The policy of the cruise line is to maximize onboard sale. Julia is very familiar with this. Their main objective, one of the main objectives, is to increase onboard sales. What are onboard sales? Onboard sales, their shops cannot be opened in the port. It has to be closed, in case you don't know. They have to close their shops in port so it doesn't compete against the local shops. So their onboard sales in port, it has to do with the activities, what the offerings of those Caribbean islands, whatever they have to offer. Now, on no cruise line, no cruise ship, unless it is a totally foreign-speaking vessel, you have 100% of those people going off on tours. The maximum amount of people that participate in activities is 45% to 48% of the total number of passengers on the cruise line. Now, the cruise line does not only carry passengers. The crew have an expenditure as well. And the crew expenditure is a very steady expenditure, with approximately $50 to $60 for each crew that comes out. People do not realize that. And that expenditure is spent cash in various little places all over. There's a policy of a particular cruise line. Happy crew, happy passengers. What do we do with the balance of 55% on board the ship? How do we get them off? The pandemic issue here should have all of us sitting down as how we can get the rest of the people participate in the destination. Now, the destinations and the people operating destination have been very selfish. They don't work together. They compete at a level individual, including myself, and don't work together in order to look at the overall picture and the overall benefit for the entire country. This is where I want to start to see the change take place, and the pandemic is causing us to think that way, and I hope we stay on this subject. I have a lot more to say, but I want to hear Julia's on that.
Right, Lee. I'm going to let Julie come back in on it, but I think we want to hear from the people as well. That was my one question, which is dominating the panel discussion. I really want to hear. So I'm going to ask them to put some of those questions on the screen for me as we go forward. And while they're doing that, Lee, I think certainly one of the things we have to look at, because the most recent data I got suggested that even those who come off are staying off for about 3 hours. So if they're at the port of call for 8 hours, 9 hours, their average time spent off and in the streets is 3 hours. There's something fundamentally wrong about our ability to keep them off the ship. So I'll then go to our Q&A. Are you ready for me? Is tech support ready? Okay. So I see a comment. It's a comment. Yeah. The ease of doing business. Let me change this. Right. The ease of doing business between Caribbean stakeholders and the cruise industry must also be examined in policymaking. And I think this comment came towards the end of Dr. McLeod's presentation, where she was giving the outline, a comment being made here that the ease of doing business should be included in that frame. Sounds like a reasonable statement to me. Any other panelists want to chime in on that, or do we just want to count that as a comment and keep moving? Yes, all right. And another.
What kind of business? Could we, if they could be more specific, what kind of business?
Well, Wendell was the one who made the comment. So if Wendell can type that for us, we can get back to it a little later on. All right. Another one, please. I definitely would like more information on how we can engage policymakers to initiate cruising to and from Caribbean islands and even the US ports for transportation. I think, again, relates to Michelle's presentation. Any advice for how Laureen can get more information? Lee?
I think.
Oh, sorry, Michelle, go ahead.
Okay. Yeah,
I'm trying to figure out.
Wait, Lee,
I think that is related
Lee,
to Dr. McLeod's information that she mentioned.
Yes, I don't think you're hearing us because she actually started talking. So let's just allow Dr. McLeod to complete. Yes.
I think certainly there would be regulations to consider in terms of transportation, but it is an opportunity that we need to explore. Leisure cruising is one aspect, transportation is another. Even in the Bahamas, when we had Hurricane Dorian, the cruise lines came in, and that was their sole, besides delivering aid and so on, transporting persons off of those islands. And we should continue with that type of mode, looking at how it will benefit the interconnection of our islands. We have air transport, but we should need to have cruise transport as well.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Doc. I see Laureen has actually said something else in the chat. Separately from that, what are we having as a package to offer guests that's different and that has a memorable experience for those 50% to come ashore? Tourism industry needs revamp and modernization. All right, point taken.
Can I say something here? Because I think we've often thought, just a quick response to that comment. We've often thought that you know, we need new products or we need new tours, and I offer that we might just need to repackage what we have. And when I say repackage, we've again, because we've not really managed our cruise tourism sector, we've provided tours for the passenger of the 70s and the 80s, but they're the passengers of today now that are looking for authentic and experiences. And I think that will become even more so, to connect in a real way with destinations. And again, we have that opportunity to really showcase what's in our islands that's beyond the sun, sea, and sand, and maybe find a way to not just repackage them at a national level, but at a regional level. You know, how many UNESCO heritage sites there are around the region? How do we take what we have and just take another look and say, you know what, how do I put a different spin. What have we not showcased that we probably need to? And I think the pandemic will give us this opportunity. And if we go back to look at tours, yes, for the most part, disembarkation or people going on organized tours might run, depending on the destination. For Barbados is, I think, almost close to 50, if not 50%. And there are still those passengers, but with the pandemic now, I am thinking, and again, based on industry discussion, that if we are almost creating a bubble around the cruise tourism product, that you might see initially when the industry starts back, depending on when it starts back, and there's so many factors that feed into this, that the cruise product might be more focused on organized tours. So that's the area we might not so much the independent traveler who originally would have done their own thing, but the people who now have the only way they could come ashore is if they're going on an organized tour, because it's a controlled environment.
Right. Thank you, Julie. I actually agree with you. And before Lee comes in, I just wanted to say that if you think that we are somehow suffering from a dearth of attractions and things to do in our ports, you should ask the question about why it is a cruise ship can therefore have a private island with a palm tree and some sand. And so the truth is, I quite agree with you that it's a matter of packaging, it's a matter of positioning, it's a matter of understanding very clearly who we are dealing with and who we're catering to, and making sure that that happens. Lee, I wanted to get your thoughts on something quickly while they put something else on the screen for me. Hold on.
Yeah.
You can say what you want to say along with this, but I wanted you to hear you on this though, because I keep hearing that we ought to sit down and have these discussions, and now is the perfect time. I want to hear a little bit more about the what. What ought we to be saying in these discussions, Lee? I mean, we've been talking a lot about port, calls, how many calls we can get. How do we deepen that discussion? What should we be talking about?
Our destination is used as part of the itinerary, as I indicated earlier on. And mass tourism, as you know, wears down even stones that you walk on. That's an environmental impact that nobody pays attention to, even sidewalks and so on. What we need to do is in discussion with our partner, and I want to keep that partner, is that, listen, we in fact want to have some more impact and benefit on a wider scale. And in order to do that, let's start with how many people you employ from our country. You're sailing in our region, and if you have our people on board, it's most likely that you'll benefit from the culture on board that the people want to come off, because our people are going to say, you got to see this and you got to see that and you got to see that. That kind of discussion we normally have, where our people are on board, and most of our people are on board and are doing this thing. You need to look at Disney. When Disney comes to Jamaica, couple thousand people come off and go up, simply because most of the staff on there are from all the Caribbean islands, and they wear the label on them. Is mandatory that they wear the label what island they're from. And so as soon as the ship approaches the island, that they're looking towards the staff to say, you got to do certain, you got to go off. That's one discussion. The second discussion is that for years, we have been going to the cruise line. I've been saying, let me see what you have. We had a Jamaican fellow who was in charge, Alvin Dennis at NCL, vice president, who said he can't understand our people. They come to me every day and they ask me, let me see what you have, I can sell it. And he's saying to them, tell me what you have. We have not ever gone to the cruise line with a bunch of offerings, supplies and so on. Listen, we can supply, and we have to be careful, because I once spoke to the chairman and owner of Carnival. He's a personal friend of mine, Mickey Harrison. And he said to me, Lee, we bought Princess Cruises, and they were paying 20 cents a bar for soap. And I'm not going to pay 20 cents a bar for soap. I'm going to pay 10 cents a bar for the soap now, because we buy millions, not a million, millions of bar of soap. One ship uses over 1 million bar of soap a year. And he says, listen, we need to understand that if we're going to go for supply to ships, we must be able to supply it continuously and in large amount. Large amount. So the Minister of Tourism is right when he said he wanted to put this thing to play so we can have the supply chain. This is something we ought to be looking at, because more people will benefit. I did a survey in Jamaica in 10 rural areas some time ago, and I asked the people about tourism. And they say, you know what I can't understand, sir? Why are these people not buying sheets and pillowcase and stuff like that? Why don't we have even the hotel? Why we don't have cotton just supplying those type of things? Normal things that are Jamaican. The visitors from ship from tourists are coming and they see China mark on some of the things we're selling, and it's turning them off. So we need to become, our region need to become an individual. This is the only country, the Caribbean is the only region you can't go and buy something that you can take home with, like the Eiffel Tower. You can get them in all sorts of sizes when you go to France, right? You can't buy anything in memorabilia from Jamaica that reminds you of Jamaica. You can't even get a little raft to buy. Many years ago, get a sandals to buy from Sandals or Cake One. So we need to have these things that remind people of the destination. But just let me go back to something here that I'm very much involved in. In that, as a destination, I saw Professor Shirley, and I hope he's listening. When the first ship was coming to Port Royal, the port was not even finished. It was incomplete. Professor Shirley put on at that port an activity which in my entire life and all the cruise activities throughout the world that I've been, I've never seen such a performance. And it was purely Jamaican. And I lift my hat to Professor Shirley. So ask him what he did. Got every single person off that ship. Ask him what he did. He got every single person on that ship, and I lift my hat to him. All right?
All
so
right.
ask him what he did.
Thank you, Lee. And in fact, it's interesting. We're all a part of that initiative. I could tell you a little bit of what was done. I don't think I should. Just very. I think that's very important. I see a number of comments in the chat. I think certainly one of the things you've pointed to, there's an example in Jamaica that's unfolding now, which could be instructive for the rest of the Caribbean, with this multi-porting that we'd like to see happening. Yeah, there is an opportunity to create these spaces of uniqueness and getting rid of lots of the sameness. So this issue about bringing everything from Asia, the development of the artisan villages, and the intention to do 5 of those around the country, 1 close to every port. And each of them is going to be themed and dealing with a different area. I think that presents an opportunity for us to speak about providing a variety and a very rich experience to those who come. So I think we have to talk a little bit more about what kind of value we're offering. And certainly I see David One has said the race to build bigger and bigger cruise ships was never ending before COVID. Before there be a move to build medium-sized, more luxurious ships targeted at higher demographic passenger and simultaneously reducing the risks. Too many eggs in one basket, inherent in building mega ships. I thought it was more of a comment than a question, David, but I think we can get back to that. Is there anyone on the panel who wants to jump in on this question? How will the COVID-19 pandemic impact the future sustainability of the cruise industry? I saw another question earlier and I will just twin it with it. What is your estimate as an expert? How long do you think before cruising returns, even if not in its old fashion, but to a place where it can be considered a substantial business?
Let me jump in here, and I want Julia to come in right after me, and because we've worked together for years. You must look at the configuration of a cruise vessel. The corridors in a cruise vessel is about 4 feet maximum, which does not conform to the social distance right now. It's not more than 4 feet the corridor, and I think some are smaller. So what is happening is that I am quite sure the cruise lines, knowing them, will work out a way of handling that social distance and the safety on board. I'm quite sure.
Yeah.
What I'm trying to put together earlier is that if they are doing those things and spend a lot of money trying to do that, we must match that in terms of our corridors as well, whether it's on the street and our building or the port or wherever they go. We must match those as well. We must match those in our vehicles, because they're going to have restrictions as to how much people are going to visit. They already started. In fact, there's one cruise line out there now, and I don't think they mind me naming them, is MSC, who right now is cruising, and you cannot come off that vessel unless you're on one of their activities. You can't come off unless you're on one of their tours and activity right now. And so that is one of the restrictions that they have. I don't know how long it will last. But to answer your question you ask, the virus is not going away. It's not something that disappears. That's my view. It doesn't disappear. We are the host as human beings. We are the host for the virus. And unless we get serious, all of us get serious and understand that we don't protect ourselves, wear masks, or what experts are telling us, we are going to suffer for it, because they may not even come, because we are now at 6,000 cases. By Christmas, we were very well at 20 or 30,000. If we get to that stage, then it might not be safe to come here. So we must look right where we are first, right in our country. What are we going to do to ensure that we're in a position to accept these vessels once they've taken these precautions?
Yes, Lee, before Julian comes in, I just want to counter a point though.
Go ahead.
Yes, so interestingly, I was a part of the discussion with the cruise ships about protocols, because I was a part of the team that designed the protocols for Jamaica. One of the early discussions was that they actually thought that our protocols were a little bit onerous, and in fact, so that was their pushback.
Yeah,
their tune has changed a bit with CDC rulings and so on, but I assure you that we're ready to match. Now, the other thing I would say, and I think this is sort of the more interesting point. If there is a real desire to partner, yes, we have to understand that we're coming from polar opposites, and therefore the truth lies somewhere in the middle. We want national development and we want regional development. Cruise lines want profit. At what point do we find some sort of nexus that achieves both of those things? And I think that's where the discussion really has to go, because we have a lot to offer. They have quite a bit to offer too in terms of what we want to achieve. So I think, Julian, if you could comment on the earlier point, and if you had a comment on that as well. You'll have to unmute, Julian.
Sorry about that. The earlier point being in terms of the size of cruise vessels and where they might go in the future. I mean, right. We've seen cruise lines have already made significant investments in these vessels. There are lots of there are several new builds that are also underway. What we might see is maybe retrofits of some of the vessels. Certainly, we've seen Carnival, they just recently sold off 18 of their ships. So I think it's given the cruise lines an opportunity to get rid of some of its older fleet, some of the fleet where it might have been more costly to retrofit at this juncture. And they're taking that opportunity. Again, the question always comes back to us. I mean, Andrew, you mentioned it about the protocols being too onerous. But it's up for us to first determine how do we best protect the health and safety of our people in our local communities, because only then can we deliver a cruise tourism product. If we don't do that, and if our communities are not feeling safe, then we can't move forward. I think going forward, that we're not going to see, especially at the inception, we're not going to see people just coming off, 6,000 passengers coming off a vessel anymore. You might have a situation where the numbers are, and I'm not saying that you will, I'm saying you probably more than likely will have a situation where the numbers are drastically reduced, where maybe perhaps crew might not be able to get off the ship. I mean, there's so many different scenarios that we could go through. I think the greatest challenge is this virus has shown itself to be very insidious. We don't know where it's going. It only takes one case, and we saw that in the restart of cruising in some of the other areas of the world in August, where in Alaska, in Norway, where we had smaller operators like Sea Dream and Uncruise restarting operations and then it just took one passenger, and that was it. And these are not any 6,000 passenger vessels. These are small, very small operators. And within the context of Norway, they were operating within a bubble. So I think it's going to be very challenging going forward. I think part of it is a great part of it, I should say, and how we face this and how we really come to terms with it is just understanding the reality. Again, it's just like everything else. This is driven by the virus. It's driven by the health issue first. That yes, we're going to prepare and be ready, but we have to have we have to solve that health crisis first. And as Lee said, the only way we can solve that is by making sure that we're protecting our local communities. So that when cruising resumes, that we're there to restart and that we have put the protocols in place to make us comfortable. I had something else I was just about to say, but it just slipped my mind, but I'm sure it will come back.
You just had a Julie
One of
moment.
the things, if I
Yes,
may add to the conversation, I think we have to be mindful of is while we wait for a vaccine and other initiatives in the Caribbean, we have to consider all the testing that needs to happen. Of course, if everyone getting on the vessel, there is some kind of rapid testing happening and all the distancing and the protocols that need to happen, then of course, the confidence, that's one of the things that we have to, it's a psychological confidence in the industry as well, that if I go on a cruise, I am going to be safe. And so the industry will need to consider how do they regain that confidence of the customers who would want to go on cruising. And I think the Royal Caribbean, Carnival, and some of the major cruise lines are already on course of doing that.
Yes, yes. Thank you very much, Michelle. And there was a previous comment on the screen which actually said that we need to unite as a region on the head tax. That's one area that's quite variable. We can't
I need to comment on that one. I need to comment on that one historically.
I comment, yes, and I know it was going to tease you out.
Yeah,
so
I tell you what.
Even though it's not on the screen right now, I really wanted to hear that one.
Listen, I lived through a period.
Yes.
You see, when Mr. Manley was asked to organize that. You can't mandate negotiation. You cannot do that. We're individuals and we sell our goods for what we feel it's worth. And to be honest with you, I'm going to say something, I hope it's not offensive to my colleagues, is that the Eastern Caribbean is 1,500 miles away from us or somewhere, farther than New York. It's not part of our region. They may have a right to do that because they're linked together closely. We are in a different region of Western Caribbean. We're not part of that tour or itinerary. That thing came up and it had a very bad taste in the cruise lines because they wanted the ability to negotiate, and they still do based on that. You know that there are arrangements out there that we don't want.
Yeah. I'm gonna throw this one out there though, Lee, because you know I'm not a rep for the CTO, but I will say onecaribbean.org. All right. No Eastern, no Western, one Caribbean. But I wanted to just based on what you said a while ago, though, isn't that how these private interests are able to negotiate the heck out of us? I mean, and I say that loosely because I'm not advocating a uniform head tax. What I am saying is, unless we can agree on some very basic things, then all that comes out of it is, if you don't want to agree with what I'm saying, the other guy up the road will agree. So I'm just gonna skip you as a port of call. I'm gonna head elsewhere. How do we strengthen our position, Michelle?
No, this is what I'm getting to. We don't have a regional negotiating or policy making framework for the cruise industry.
Absolutely.
So it's each person going and dealing with the cruise line. There is not that consideration where all the governments are coming together, when they are looking at it across the board, the benefits and so on. And I would think, you mentioned One Caribbean at all, the Caribbean Tourism Organization, which is the body that brings together all the tourism stakeholders, should take that leadership role. I hope Neil would agree that for this region to really benefit from the cruise industry, we have to see it as our industry. We have to take ownership of it, and we have to develop policies. And that head tax is a policy that all governments would need to agree to. But I know we are different and we have our differences, and that is one of the challenges of organizations such as the CTO. But
Yes.
there must be the will to do it. Otherwise, we would not get the benefits that we can from the cruise industry.
Correct, correct. And just as a key, just before you come in, Julian, just to put two things together, I think we can firmly, if we want to identify takeaways, the suggestion that there ought to be discussion surrounding head tax, whether unified, variable, or within a band. It seems to me too that what's coming out of this is that there needs to be some sort of regional coordination of the efforts. I mean, I know right now the regional coordination is Lee and Julian, but I think, and I saw a comment from someone earlier that, well, it was a question about whether there is a committee that negotiates. That does not, that framework and structure does not exist. And I think coming out of this discussion, that ought to be one of the recommendations.
Could you say it again? A committee, regional committee or local committee?
Regional.
Okay.
Regional. So I think that's a good takeaway. I'm not sure if it's Lorraine who said it earlier. Someone said it or asked it. Yeah, Julian, you wanted to comment?
Yeah, I just a couple of things, because I'm partnership does it for me. It's my passion. I think it's really what will drive the industry forward. And as I mentioned, I think probably very briefly, we started something with, it started out essentially as 2 Caribbean destinations, Jamaica, oddly enough, and Barbados, go figure. And we were both exhibiting at Sea Trade Europe, both had these 2 tiny little booths, and when we looked over at each other, we were like, this doesn't make any sense. Next year, let's just do this together. And just from that genesis, right? Several years later, we had 14 destinations, 60 people coming with us who were now talking more, sharing more information. I mean, you would see, I think it is such a great example of what can happen if we really decide to collaborate, even at that scale. We've always proposed that model would serve as a platform to create the type of associations. And I'm not talking at the policy side, because I think that's in respect of maybe at the level of CARICOM, etc., similar to what happens in Europe with the EU, but at the level of other cruising regions such as Europe, where there's a Cruise Europe. It's an association of ports and operators. And they have come together really and truly just doing one thing, driving business to the region, ensuring that they're benchmarked in terms of standards, and that they are maximizing all opportunities by a partnership. It's always been interesting to me, again, particularly with my background, that cruise lines were able to form a partnership in respect of the sector to come together. We have CLIA, we have the FCCA, to look at how they manage their relationships, how they approach certain challenges and opportunities collectively, even so far as they are competitors. And I think that's a lesson for us Caribbean destinations. We do a lot of talking around it, huh?
Yeah,
but yeah. We haven't quite really, I think, internalized what it would mean. I mean, we sat through a presentation a few weeks back from our friends from the Med and Europe. It was just a small grouping, and I was very impressed and I could say it's jealous to see the level of cooperation. It's always been there, but their approach to issues such as as COVID and what they put in place. And this is going to be critical for us, because how do we continue to negotiate and try to operate in an insular type fashion as individual destinations? And we're coming up against this great marketing and promotional machinery in other regions of the world. So, you know, when we talk about how do we move forward, when we talk about things like being better able to or being better prepared to look at resurgence of COVID, and not just COVID, but the likelihood of other future outbreaks or some type of disaster, heaven forbid. How are we able to bolster regional resiliency? But critically, one of the key threads that's been coming out of this discussion is how do we create more equitable partnership arrangements with cruise lines? And we've tried the individual route. It hasn't really worked out for us. There's been a consolidation and a globalization of the industry. And we really need to be able to say, this is where we are. We need that machinery that is apolitical, but that can feed into a political framework that can help to inform policy, help to interpret it and advance it in respect to the sector. So something that incorporates destinations, ports, attractions, all the people really involved in the cruise tourism value chain.
Very critical, Julie. And in fact, I will say to you that the key word you used there was that we need an apolitical construct to be able to take this forward.
I have an important point I want to make, if you don't mind.
No, Leah, I can't make it though, because I want you on the floor though, because I want you to take this next question from my star student.
Yes.
The question is there a strategy that could be used or put in place to have cruise passengers stay over and have them spend more? And what could we offer them that's different?
That's what I was going to deal with.
Oh, well, go on.
I saw it there.
Yeah.
I just want to clarify that cruise passengers do stay over on home porting. They arrive sometime in plain loads before, a day or two before, or three before, and they join the ship later on. And those coming off the vessel go to hotels before they go to the airport, and they're sold tours and so on. Both tours when some of them before they come off the ship, and when they come off and stay in Jamaica. So that is in place, not only by us, but the cruise lines. As I say, onboard revenue is important for them. One thing I want to point out along with this, though, where cruise ship goes, hotel does well. Anywhere cruise cause, hotels do well. But there's a danger to people who want to put cruise lines, people in hotels heavily, because the cruise lines have a large negotiating power, larger numbers like aircraft, and they'll probably reserve the room, and your regular guests can't go in there. You have to be careful about that. Let me explain that. For example, if the cruise lines are doing home porting and so on, and they don't have their own airline, and they're going to the regular airlines to get, they'll buy out all the seats, and your regular people who are coming tourists to Jamaica may have difficulty getting on those planes because they can't buy the seat, and they'll buy the seats well in advance. But to go back to answer that question, excellent question. There's a thought from one of our investors in Jamaica that was going to put in a ship, and what they would do is pick up the ship as a hotel, the tour, and then drop off in Jamaica, go and pick up another set, and do the same thing and take away those from the hotel and take them out. But it's a very expensive proposition.
Yeah, thank you very much, Lee. And I think, and another one of my brilliant students is online now, Alistair Anderson. And the question, I think it's a very good question, because it almost resembles the question I wanted to ask you as a closeout takeaway question. So I'm going to ask each panelist to respond to this question. And then I'm going to ask you at the very end of responding to this question, if it's not already said in what you have to say, that you will give one tangible takeaway, something that you want to be fruitful and that will come from this discussion that can get some legs to move forward. So the question is, what is the plan to make the industry stronger and more equipped to handle situations like these? I suppose the question she's asking is about pandemic proofing, which I don't think we can quite do, but it's about resilience. And so I throw this question to each of the panelists. I will start in the order of your presentation. So Dr. McLeod, then Dr. Bailey, and then Julian.
Resilience is a very complicated concept to deal with for the cruise sector. I think one of the things we have to consider is really the length of time that this situation where we are in a pandemic will actually occur. There are so many variables. And so it is that while we are going through this crisis, and it's a prolonged crisis, how do we find ways of managing the crisis better? Whether it would be testing, whether it would be the protocols, whether it be sharing information, our destinations, how do we go about managing this crisis on an ongoing basis? I think there are lots of learnings given what has happened, particularly in the early days, how we could have managed better when we had so many members of crew being on board of the vessels. But now I think things are stabilizing in the cruise industry. And so the normalization that would happen is perhaps going to happen in the next couple of months. A question was asked about recovery. It will take a couple of years really to get back to the level of visitors that we had in the industry in 2019. So we have to be mindful of that as well.
Yes, yes. Thank you very much, Michelle. Lee?
Mr. Coordinator, I like what's happening here, but because I think we're all basically on the same page. Dr. McLeod has made a very important point there. The expectation of it's going away and tomorrow morning we're back to normal as we were. We need to get that clear to people. It's not going to happen. It's going to take time for even ourselves to adjust to it and to come out of it. It's not something that's going to go away tomorrow. One of the things that I want to refer to is that the government in various countries can do so much. They can give us advice and set up systems and have curfews and so on. We don't know how effective those things are, but it's the best we have to work with. And unless we work with those systems, we're not going to get to the point where we can feel comfortable. Right now, I personally am feeling uncomfortable because my own people are not listening and obeying the protocols that are out there. So I'm saying to you, for us to move forward, we need to perhaps have some protocol police, I don't know, something to put in place to make sure that the people are, other than arresting them or locking them up because strain the government, to make sure that they're abiding by the protocols out there. So they understand and explain. There must have something. I have to shout at people to put the masks on and so on. I do that regularly because I'm not only protecting myself, I'm trying to protect them. So we may need to get that serious in doing that thing. In order for us to move forward and to all of us to be safe, we can't do anything for all of us are sick. And so we need to concentrate on that. That perhaps is not part of cruise shipping, but it's a part of survival. And I think we need to examine that very carefully.
Yes. All right. Thank you, Lee. Julian?
When I look at this, I'm looking at the question, trying to read it without my glasses here on the screen, by the way. And we're talking about how is the region, how do we make the industry stronger and more equipped to handle situations like these? I think, you know, I will always come back to the same thing. Had we had a cooperative type mechanism, we would have been better able to deal with some of the issues that came out of the pandemic. And yes, we will be able to develop protocols, and that's all part and parcel of it. But the question is, for us, is more long-term and more about, again, regional resiliency. And I think that resiliency can only be effective through an effective partnership arrangement within and amongst all the Caribbean islands in respect of the cruise tourism sector. I am not talking about association or alliance or anything that is in conflict with the sector, but is actually working hand in hand with the sector in respect of developing the cruise tourism product in a way that brings greater benefits to the communities and continues to allow cruise lines to be able to deliver the returns to their shareholders. I think that the plan, again, if I would put forward, is for us to have that regional mechanism in place so we can move forward. It's happening right now in other parts of the world, and again, as the #1 cruise tourism region, it's very stark that it hasn't yet happened here.
Yeah, thank you very much to all the panelists for those comments just now. And I think certainly it has been quite substantive. In fact, my thought processes have gone wild now just coming out of this discussion. And I think certainly what I hear, whatever you want to call it, if you want to call it a mechanism or an ecosystem or a construct or a committee like Lorraine called it, it sounds to me like there needs to be an approach that will help us to be more unified in how we go forward, because it cannot be business as usual. I think certainly another point made by Lorraine, who speaks very pointedly, is that in this negotiation, both sides of the table need to exercise strength. And the point she makes is that so that we can be happy as well as they. And so I just wanted to thank everyone for participating today. It's been very engaging. As Jimmy Solomon told us earlier, this is the role of the university to stimulate this kind of discussion, to get you talking, to get you advocating, to get you championing a cause that will lead to some sort of action that will make our region and our countries better. And so I really want to just thank everyone who has put it together. Thanks to Jimmy for conceiving of these ideas. I also want to give a special thanks to the marketing team of the Mona School of Business and Management, led by Janice Henley. And I want to single out Steffian Ray, who has been lead on this project and who has been an excellent taskmaster for all of us. I want to also say a big thank you to tech support, who kept everything seamless. Thank you very much. You all have been simply phenomenal. But I really want to stop to thank the audience, the participants, for how engaging you were, for your passion, for your insights, and certainly for just simply joining us today. Ladies and gentlemen, I give a big thank you to my panelists. I'm sure you will agree with me that Dr. McLeod, Dr. Bailey, and Ms. Burrows were simply on point today. We now need to take this discussion. It's a recorded session. We need to take this discussion and we need to take it forward. I want to engage you just for a couple more minutes though, to make a few plugs. I want you to watch some things that we have to share with you. Develop yourself professionally. There's going to be a video. Is that correct? Learn more about your range of professional development courses being offered online. Transformational leadership in the 21st century business communication. There are short courses also being offered in this area by the Mona School of Business and Management. Please visit the site msbm-uwi.org. Is that forward or backward slash? Scheduled. And I see Daniel saying that's a very informative discussion. I too feel quite edified by the discussion. Also, we want to share another with you. Are we going to project that now, Tech? I'm not seeing the other plug just now, so I'm going to thank you all. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And let this not be the end of the discussion. Let this be the start of our engagement. Let this be the start of our advocacy. Let this be the start of our almost evangelical efforts to get this right. It is do or die. It is now or never. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you, sir. Great job. Great job. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Dr. McLeod.
Thank you, panel. You're fantastic.
Listen, we need to get together and discuss this again.
Hobby
We should. We will.
okay?
Yes.
We need to get together and discuss. I'd like to talk to Dr. McLeod on some of the issues she brought up here,
Yes.
as it relates to local people who have been left out of the loop for many years in nearly all the tourism product. We have not been able to get any benefits and impact to the local people a lot. I wanted to discuss with her. I know she lectures, and I have some thoughts on that. Right?
Yes. Yes. Excellent.
Okay.
So I'm
Thank
sure
you.
you have our contact. Just make sure you have everybody's contact. If not, you can get it from me.
Yes, I
All
certainly
right.
will, sir.
Have a great evening. Is it 9 p.m. where you are, Michelle, or is it 8?
No, I'm an hour ahead, 9. It's
9
after 9.
p.m.
And it's 9 for you as well, Julie. So early night for me and Lee. All right.
Julie, take care. Nice seeing you again.
Take care.
All right,
Bye-bye.
Thanks a lot. All the best.
All right.
All right. Thanks, Omar. Thanks, everyone.
Okay, thanks. Take care.
Bye.
Thanks, Steffian, for all your help.
No problem.
And Mr. Jimmy. Where Jimmy? He gone.
The Mosaram is going to sleep. I will call him later on anyway.
Okay, take care. Nice meeting you all.
Okay, bye.
Bye.